Good morning. It's Saturday, February the 13th, and this is The Drill. Thank you. And the prayer of the day. I stand before you washed in the blood of your Son, and robed in his righteousness. You have raised me from death to life, and have broken all the chains of wickedness that had bound me in sin. I have been set free from sin, and here willingly become a slave to your righteousness. Amen. So I'm Ron, your host, and welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And like I said, I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. One of the things that I was thinking about today, I want to read a little bit from a book that I got from Amazon Kindle. I got a couple of books that are absolutely fascinating. One of them is called, let me see if I can, The Little Blue Book. And so it's about the Democrat Party and how to be a good Democrat. And another one is Don't Think of an Elephant. And it's the same basic idea, but it's the strategies and tactics that this guy, Mr. Lakoff, is laying out for the left. So it's a little bit like being in on a staff meeting, so to speak, a Democrat Party staff meeting, if you want to find out what it is that their strategy and tactics are. Analysis is a good thing if you're analyzing tactics and strategy. If you're analyzing a person psychologically in terms of their motives, then that's a bad thing because it leads to an emotional malaise and a lack. It has a way of tamping down your righteous outrage and righteous indignation. But being able to be prepared for what it is that your enemy is going to be doing, enemy or opponent, is a good thing. So what I wanted to do was start by reading some of the things from the introduction. Let me see if there's an introduction here, if this is called a preface, and read some of the ideas, because it reinforces a lot of the things that I've been saying about socio-political issues in this country. And there is an introduction. It's called The Importance of Moral Frames. The central issue of our times, this is the author speaking, is what kind of country America is and ought to be. That is, what system of values should govern us. So I want to comment real quick that throughout this book he pretends to have values and pretends that the Democrats have values, that Crowleyists have values. They have no such thing. None of them have any type of values. The Democrat Party and everybody on the left is destructive. What they have are anti-values that they're trying to brainwash you into believing are actual values. First, back to the author, we must understand that all politics is moral. Every political leader says to us that we should do what he or she recommends because it's right, not because it's wrong or it doesn't matter. And today, our politics is governed by the two very different views of what is right and wrong. And the left, again, as an aside, again, is not interested in right or wrong, at least in terms of creating change. They don't want to hear from right or wrong because if you involve the left in a binary conversation and they lose the argument, they're shown to be wrong or immoral or evil or whatever, that harms the movement and may do irreparable damage to their left-wing movement. So he is lying here when he says that it's all about right and wrong for both sides. It's definitely about right and wrong for the true conservatives, because realistically speaking, we're all looking for the same thing. No matter who you are on this planet, you're looking to be happy. You're looking for happiness. And that's why right and wrong is essential, and why people should be interested in having conversations about what is right and wrong. If you're looking for happiness and you're doing it the wrong way, then you should be interested in finding that out, having somebody tell you, or otherwise discovering that you're doing things wrong so that you can do things right, get back on the right track, and get on with leading a happy life. The Crowleyist view, mostly in the Democratic Party, is that democracy depends on citizens caring about each other and taking responsibility both for themselves and for others. This yields a view of government with a moral mission to protect and empower all citizens equally. The mechanism for accomplishing this mission is through what we call the public, a system of public resources necessary for a decent private life and a robust private enterprise: roads and bridges, education, healthcare, communication systems, court systems, basic research, police and the military, a fair judicial system, clean water and air, safe food, parks, and much more. Now, I want to interject here is that this was what Obama was doing and talking about when he said, you didn't build that, you didn't make that. You may remember that there was he was making a speech somewhere, and he was talking about small businesses and how the Republicans support small business and people with the idea of property rights. I built this business. And he was also saying, you're not smarter, you're not better, you don't work any harder. Well, not true, absolutely untrue. But anyways, as it relates to this particular entry into this introduction, he literally came out and said, you didn't build this. He said the roads were built by, and he described all the things that are done by what is referred to in this book, the public. In other words, by the government, by city government, state government, federal government. And that without those systems, it wouldn't have happened. And like the Democrats usually do, they'll tell the truth, but they will only tell part of it. Instead of telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, they will tell the truth, but they won't tell the whole truth. Or they'll tell the truth, but then they'll throw in some lies, mix it in with some lies, so that everything gets kind of muddled up and you just kind of end up going along with it. Same thing with President Obama. He knows that, yes, without roads, where are we going to be? Yes, without sewer systems and water systems and electricity, where are we going to be? But the question really is, does that have to be provided by public? Does it have to be provided by government? And the answer to that question is no. We know that with absolute certainty because very often it isn't the government that actually does the work of creating the roads or building other types of infrastructure. It is the government contracts with private organizations, private businesses to create all that. So in reality, what Obama's trying to do is suggest that it is the government that created the roads and created the sewer systems, when in fact no such thing occurred. The government ordered it be done. They provided the specs that they wanted, and after it was built by private industry, by private companies, then the government went ahead and manages it, collects the fees and tolls and whatnot, and then ostensibly, although not terribly well recently, ostensibly maintains that infrastructure. So the fact of the matter is we did build it, and not only did we build it, but it's a question really of did we build it directly or indirectly. I pay taxes, the business across the street pays taxes, and through our taxes we're paying for the building and maintaining of roads and other infrastructure. So again, it's telling the truth, but not the whole truth. So, and that's the way they try to get away with a lot of crap here. So, and I referred to it as Crowleyist rather than progressive. I refuse to acknowledge any type of movement or party or whatnot called progressive because it's a trap. If you concede that, let's say, President Obama was progressive, then anybody who stands in opposition to Obama is regressive by default. So you're already now, if anytime you're engaging in an argument with somebody who calls themselves progressive and you acknowledge that, you're already starting your argument in the hole. Because he's basically saying anything that he propounds or promotes is automatically progressive because he is progressive. So anybody that dares to argue with him or stands in opposition must therefore be regressive and automatically wrong. And psychologically, that's a very important thing to understand. The author goes on, conservatives hold the opposite view that democracy exists to provide citizens with the maximum liberty to pursue their self-interest with little or no commitment to the interests of others. Under this view, there should be as little of the public as possible. Instead, as much as possible should be relegated to what we call the private. So again, throughout this book, he's talking about the public versus the private, which is a false dichotomy. Let's see. Instead, private. The private is comprised of individuals, private life, businesses owned by them, private enterprise, and institutions set up by groups and individuals, private clubs and associations. The private is, for conservatives, a moral ideal, sacrosanct, where no government can tread, whether to help or hinder, regulate, or even monitor. Now, what I wanted to say about this, again, is a false dichotomy, and one of the things that he's getting here is a moral ideal. No, it's not a moral ideal, because conservatives are not idealistic. We're realistic. And the fact of the matter is, one of the arguments he tries to make unsuccessfully in this book is that the public precedes the private, and that the private springs from the public. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Private precedes the public. It is the private individuals that get together and decide what kind of public that is that they want, whether that public is a democratic republic or whether it is a parliamentary system of government or even a dictatorship or a despotic form of government. So the private comes first. It's not a moral ideal. It is simply realistic. It is not sacrosanct. Again, it is realistic. And it isn't so much that where no government can tread. And he's trying to make this into an either-or situation, that for the conservatives, they want no government whatsoever, and that the public wants, the people that support public, the Crowleyists want all public. Everything run by the government, or as much as possible that can be run by the government. And that's not the case. What the conservatives are saying is we start with the private. That's where we start, and that we have a respect. That was the other issue I was going to get to. The reason we have the private is because every single human being on this planet has an expectation of privacy. It may be reasonable, it may be unreasonable, but we have an expectation of privacy, and therefore we have private property. Okay, we have our own houses or apartment complexes. We have our own businesses. We have our own phones, etc. We have private property as a way of protecting and meeting that expectation, reasonable or otherwise, of privacy. So that's what you start with, is the idea that every individual, there is no possible way to have dignity for the individual without an expectation of and the availability, a way of availing for themselves privacy. Okay, there's a lot of talk on the left about dignity. Left doesn't know squat about dignity. If you have to live your life in public, such as even homeless people have reasonable expectations of privacy, and even though they spend their life, at least the hardcore homeless, open to public view. But again, it's recognized that there's no dignity in that. If you're out taking a dump in the on the curb or near the curb, something like that out in public. There's no dignity in that. That's why we have private bathrooms, places that are secluded and away from other people's, where we can conduct business like that and do so with dignity. So the dignity of the individual is the ability to fulfill their expectation of privacy, and that's what comes first. Government is basically, simply put, is a set of rules that we all agree to and we all agree to live by, so that we know what it is that government or laws, what it is that we can expect from one another. I step out of my house, I know what to expect from you. If we lived in an anarchy situation, then it would be a very dicey situation. Every time you leave your home, you don't know what to expect from people. If you say hello, are you going to get shot? So you know what to expect from people, and that's what government's about. It's also, American government is about being neutral, not the individual being neutral, but the government being neutral. If you have a neutral government, we can have confidence when we take our problems, our issues, our disputes to the government, to the court, police departments, whatever, to get them resolved. The government is the resolver of problems of the last resort. You and I try to settle issues, say property issues, where the fence belongs on the property, and we try to work that out between the two of us. And if we can't do that, then we can and should resort to a neutral third party to help us resolve the issue or resolve it for us. But it all starts from the reasonable or otherwise, let's just say reasonable expectation of privacy. So that's where he's getting everything wrong. He says one is like separate from the other. He's creating a false dichotomy, whereas one complements the other. The government is in place, at least in part, to help me live a dignified life as a human being, and that is to have respect for property. I have a house here, and somebody else decides that they want to come into the house without my permission. It's trespassing. We have a law, it's called trespassing. You're coming into my house without my permission. So I call the police being part of the government, and the police respond, eject the trespassers, and perhaps arrest and prosecute and convict them. So, but that's an example of where government is aiding me in my living a dignified life, which means aiding me in maintaining a reasonable expectation of privacy. Let's see what else. What other slanderous kind of things is he saying here? The moral ideal that where no government can tread, help or hinder, regulate, or even monitor, and individuals are self-regulating. There is, by the way, no such thing as regulation. The theory of regulation is that the government regulates industries, all, some, whatever, but they regulate industries. Let's say a classic example in California, we have something called the California Public Utilities Commission. And the Public Utilities Commission was created to regulate the utility industries, gas, electric, etc. So the idea is that if you put government, in this case appointees, the governor appoints these people to be on this commission, and that these people have supposedly no skin in the game, as President Obama used to like to say, and so therefore they're going to make objective decisions about, for instance, utility rates. And so this way the utilities cannot keep escalating their prices and put poor people in the position of having to choose between paying their electric bill and buying food, that kind of thing, to put it very dramatically. And so the CPUC, unfortunately, is again made up of political appointees. They want to keep their jobs. They're paid and they expect to keep their jobs. So they're thinking not in terms of profit and loss like the utilities are, but in political terms. They're thinking about losing whether or not making this particular decision is going to cost them their jobs. For instance, the utilities come to the CPUC and say, we need to raise our rates so that we can upgrade our equipment, meaning fix, repair various lines. We need money to be able to go out maybe and trim trees and get them away from the electric lines so they don't present a fire hazard, particularly in windy situations. CPUC now has a political decision to make. They know if they raise rates, if they okay the raise in rates, that they are going to run the risk of angering the ratepayers, and that those ratepayers, if they get angry enough, will go to the governor and complain, and the governor then may decide to make changes on the board. Maybe all of the commissioners end up without a job, they get fired and replaced by new commissioners. So they're not going to be making a decision objectively. They're going to be making the decisions as to whether or how to regulate these industries subjectively in terms of their own. They're just looking through the prisms of their own political careers rather than looking at it from a profit and loss standpoint. So there really is no such thing as regulation if regulation means that an objective third party that's going to, and I guess they're thinking that if we can create a court system that can be objective in settling disputes, that somehow we can create a commission that is also neutral and making decisions about whether or not to raise rates. And it doesn't translate. It doesn't work that way. So regulation is not only unnecessary, it just shouldn't be done. Because it just doesn't exist. All you're doing is transferring one interest from the profit and loss interest to political interests. And so everybody's always got a stake in things. Let me see. Private interests should rule. This is back to the author. Even if that means that corporate interests, the most powerful of private interests, govern our lives through a laissez-faire free market. Citizens are free to sink or swim on their own, and citizens have more power. One of the things that the left wants you and I to believe is that the individual has absolutely no power, when in reality we have absolute power. Let's look at, again, the utilities, which are monopolies. One of the things the left goes on and on about is we can't have monopolies. We can't have monopolies. In the state of California, there's 3 utilities, electric utilities, and they have a monopoly, a government-granted monopoly. About 100 years ago, the state of California granted to these 3 utilities, they let them split the state up from north. You had PG&E in the north, you had Southern California Edison in the more or less in the middle and a little bit of the south, and then SDG&E that handled everything from LA to the border. So it's split up into 3, and then the idea was we'll have a Public Utilities Commission that will go ahead and regulate everything so that these monopolies don't starve you of energy or, again, make you mortgage your house to pay your bills. But if they hadn't created the monopoly in the first place, we wouldn't need a Public Utilities Commission. So, and if I decide, if the utility companies say to me, you're raising my rates and raising my rates and raising my rates, then what's going to happen is what? I'm going to at some point say, you know what, screw it. As a matter of fact, I could do it now. If I'm just tired of paying the city for electric, I can say, you know what, cut it off. I'll take care of my own. And I can make other arrangements. And so that is my absolute power to shut them out of my life. I don't have to have electricity. I can find other ways to heat and provide light for my home other than, or at least I don't have to use their electricity. I can also go out and get propane. I can get other types of electrical energy that are generated in different ways. And so I can get off the grid and become independent of this particular system that we've got going on here. The same thing goes with television. I don't like what's going on cable. I say, screw you, and I go and I can put up some rabbit ears and watch television over the air. Quality is marginal, but I can do that. Or I can just say, screw it to TV altogether and find other ways of entertaining myself. So, the left is always going to try and convince you as an individual that you have no power when the opposite is true. You have absolute power. Without the individual, there are no groups. Without the individual, there is no government. So remember that. But that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and until next time, I'm Ron, and that is The Drill.